Welcome, Thibault and Varun. Yeah, it's good to see you again. It would be good if you could introduce yourselves and Hibachi. I'm sure most people already know what you're building at Hibachi, so just give us a high level.
For sure. Hey guys, thanks Kieran for having us. I'm Varun, one of the co-founders of Hibachi, and we are building a stablecoin-native FX exchange. So that's the short and sweet description of what we're doing.
Yeah, very short and sweet. Hi, everyone. Really excited to be here. Thibault, one of the co-founders as well. And yeah, Varun kind of gave the TLDR of what our mission is today. Obviously, a lot of you know us as a perps venue. And, we have like aspirations to go and tackle like the biggest market in the world in terms of like nominal size and traded volume. So we're very excited to kind of point forward our architecture that direction. We see a lot of opportunity for stable coins to disrupt essentially the foreign exchange market. But we'll get into that. I think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. That's the LDR.
Yeah, thanks. I guess we've been building together for a long time. So it's been like a pleasure working with you. But there is like quite a lot to unpack, and there's been a long journey and to where we are today. So I'm looking forward to unpacking that in the next, hopefully 15 to 20 minutes. Let's see. So Thibault, Varun, whoever wants to take it, like what's your opinion on the current state of DeFi? I think there's been a lot going on recently. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, Varun usually has some much better thoughts than I do. I'll just quickly share. This is bear market vibes. And so like I think Hasib actually shared a good tweet. He was like, oh, by the way, guys, like the amount hacked in like 2024 or whatever it was like still 2x what it is this year. And that's just, I think, indicative of just things feel tougher when price is down. And then the same thing could have happened when Bitcoin was at 120K and nobody would have, cared too much. So I think a lot of it is sentiment based. And so when I see like all this doomsday, kind of back and forth on X about the DeFi and DeFi is dead, I tend to kind of just try to take a step back and remember that people are very, very influenced by price action, more so than I think a lot of other things. So that's generally been my filter for over the last few weeks, and especially through these like tougher times. Which I don't know, Varun, how you're interpreting everything.
I'm in general optimistic about anything, even if you put me in the worst possible situations. Always
there is bias. Yeah.
There's a bias if you're asking me. And so yeah, I think I'm quite optimistic about everything, right, in general. But also there's reasons to be optimistic. If you think of crypto, it's only been 10, sure, Bitcoin came out in early 2009-ish, but really, I think the DeFi and everything else took off in 2016. And within the last 10 years, I think we've come really, really far as an industry. So I feel like we are finally at the stage where, the whole mainstream adoption that we've been asking about for all these years is finally happening, in front of us. And I think like the regulatory landscape is a lot more clearer. So I feel like mainstream adoption, is when you essentially can't really tell what the underlying stack you're using, right? So like if you look at the early 90s of the internet, like you were a lot more, using your Linux tools, using your command line. It was a lot more, hands-on, and then you had to know the little dirty details of everything that you're using tech-wise, right? And now today you're using iPhone, you can't tell what's underneath and you don't think about it, right? So, but then there's a lot of technology that is powering your iPhone, for example. So the same applies with blockchain and whatnot, right? So 2016, you had to know the smart contracts, you had to know every single line what it's doing, you had to download and you had to set up your wallets and then with those things, I feel like they will be abstracted away once you start seeing more adoption. And I think that is happening already, right? So
yeah, I 100% agree. Just on Thibault's point, I guess we're not even halfway through the year, so we still have time to be 2024 in terms
I was going to say set up Mist browser if anyone did that back in the day, but maybe not.
Yeah, hacks have been a big point of this year so far. But as Varun pointed to, abstraction is happening in real time, and that's even on the security side. We're using, like ourselves at Kappa Lab, we're using many more tools, MPC wallets, off-exchange custodians, and they're all connecting these days with on-chain smart contracts or protocols, which is like super cool. And it's allowing it's allowing for new use cases and new users to be onboarded. So also bullish with you guys. Yeah, not bearish as most people think.
Oh, but it is not one-to-one. So I pulled up the tweet actually. So at this point in 2025, it was 1.71 billion that was hacked. So this time last year, and then so far this year, 772 million that's been hacked. So these are not pretty numbers. Like we shouldn't be like throwing parties because, oh my God, guys, we only got hacked 770 million. Obviously, like that affects, you know, people like significantly. But again, I think that's the larger sentiment. Obviously doesn't help. Like the price action was a lot better a year ago. And so even though we were like, there was like double the amount that was actually being hacked by this time last year. So I thought that was like super indicative of where we're at today.
That's a good point. Like I don't think price action is necessarily the barometer of adoption, and it isn't this year, right? Isn't this year?
No, it's not. No, definitely not.
It's a bit to what you guys are building. You're enabling use cases that haven't been there before, and you know, the users, the institutions, I mean, you could probably speak to this yourselves. They care about the tech and the use case, right? More than what's happening in price action today, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two products in crypto, in my opinion. There are tokens and then there's everything else. And I think there are cohorts of users for both types of products. And it actually, I think the overlap is pretty small. The person who is like interested in Ethereum today or Bitcoin, like the net new buyer this last bull cycle of those tokens was mainly through like ETFs and kind of institutions, etc. But they are not touching like DeFi products, right? So I think we've decoupled like DeFi activity as a means to kind of price a token completely. I think you can see that with Ethereum over the last few days. So I only see that trend going that direction where the token is its own product and the underlying tech is its own thing as well. And sometimes those things are like not correlated at all. And I think that's just what it's going to be from here.
Okay.
I have a bit of a different take there. I feel like while they could be viewed as a separate product right now, I feel like over time, I feel like the space between equities and tokens will sort of merge, right? So I almost think of tokens as a much more efficient way of issuing ownership in a company, right? So same way, you know, your crypto or Bitcoin or even stable coins basically made the issuance of dollar and movement of dollar a lot more efficient, but you don't need the traditional banking rails to move money around the world. You can just do that by using decentralized blockchain network, right? So you could do the same in principle to tokenize equities or stock or anything else, right? So you don't need if you're trading the physical delivery or any of those that you previously had in before crypto, right? So now you can basically say the utility value of a company can be represented via the tokens that pretty much function as your common stock and preferred stock, right? So at least that's where I think we're getting. We may not be there yet, but I think that's kind of where it makes the most sense to me.
Yeah, that's maybe. I think that's super interesting. Like I'm waiting for my Anthropic airdrop, so I can use that Anthropic utility, extra perks in Claude. But I think SBF has like kind of stolen that from us. Okay, well let's talk a bit more about Hibachi. A big feature to Hibachi is privacy. How has privacy played into conversations you're having with institutions, and is it a feature that is helping you onboard more users or will play a part in the future onboarding process?
So I think at least so obviously we launched as a perps menu last year, right? And then sort of switched the company direction to be more focused on FX. And one of the reasons for doing that was, you know, one, we saw there was too much saturation in the perps space, where everybody was essentially trying to be the 11th best hyperliquid, and we didn't want to be competing in that space. That was one. And then the second bigger decision for doing that was we saw that one is FX is the largest market in the world, right? So in terms of just the activity, and currently I feel like pretty much anyone who is even offering FX are treating that as one of many RWAs. And I feel like I always feel weird about RWA as a category because pretty much everything, commodities, equities, or FX, they are all their own pretty much markets, and they're massive on their own accord, right? So I feel like there is a massive market around FX that is being underserved currently, and there's a big opportunity to take a big pie, right? So
Yeah.
what can be done there, and because FX happens to be predominantly institutions who are trading that, one of the things they do care about is privacy, right? So it turns out, this works nicely into it, because at the end of the day, if you're having like large, neobanks or payment service providers or cross-border providers or any of these guys who are moving lots of money every day, one of the things they don't want to do is have their transactions be indexed publicly for everybody to audit, right? So having that guardrail where they, you can't really see the activity, but then, that's a big deal. And at the same time, obviously, why do it on chain? It actually allows you for, it solves you don't need an exchange to hold custody of funds, which is great. And it also makes the movement of funds a lot more seamless. So as a result, we chose this architecture where we use off-chain central limit order book for high performance and actually carrying out the trades, but then we prove the exchange operations on chain using ZK proofs, so which kind of gives you the privacy. At the same time, you can verify exchange solvency and then move the funds in and out a lot more seamlessly than say a centralized venue.
Varun, do you find that the fintechs or the institutions or the cross-border payments guys are more willing to leverage on-chain or hybrid protocols these days? Like, we're seeing a ton more partnerships between these fintechs and protocols, whether it's Hyperliquid or other protocols who offer different services. I think FX is
No, I mean, right now we've been having lots of conversations with like all these guys, and there is a significant interest. Like 4 years ago, it wasn't the case, right? So they'll be like, "Oh, get back to me when in like 10 years, right?" So or in Q5. So I think that's no longer the case, but like everybody's like super keen to be on it, right? And I think stablecoins has a big role to play in that. But that's it. I think one of the things is, obviously, I don't think they'll care about the underlying tech. Like if you're talking about cross-border providers or like just fintechs and so on, I think the key things come down to, at least from the context of FX, it's like the direction exposure they have in any FX / the price that you can cut down on, and the settlement times, right? Those are the things that will likely matter the most, right? So if you can move money quickly, instantly, that's like a big win. And then especially in emerging markets, if you're paying like nearly 1% or 70 bips, 80 bips in like fees to the interbank, if we can make that extremely competitive with a central limit order book, that essentially saves you millions of dollars a year in FX that you would be paying otherwise, which is a big one. Then you've got the last bit is, obviously, I forgot the third one, but I think maybe I didn't have the third one.
No, it's bullish. It's bullish.
Settlement, yes. But I feel like settlement already is addressed by stablecoins. So I don't know if Hibachi is uniquely solving settlement, because you already have blockchains that allow you to move stablecoins from wallet to wallet quickly, right? So that part already is addressed.
I would say that from my experience, there is not a breadth of liquidity on non-USD stablecoins, and I'm sure this is like something you're looking to tackle. But that's key, especially for those cross-border payments or remittance folks who need that. At the moment, you're solving the settlement and the liquidity in one, and stablecoins are suited for that right now.
I think what we're really solving for is price discovery. So if you think about FX pre-stablecoin era, so essentially it was a walled garden, right? So primarily dominated by the interbank network. So there are like 72 banks that are members of the CLS, and they are essentially, responsible for most of the FX movement. So if you're like a broker or a PSP or anybody, you're basically aggregating quotes. You either get a preferential choice quote from the interbank, or otherwise, you're sourcing it from different secondary players, right? So there is like no transparent, fair price discovery in the way you would have for equities and others on NASDAQ, on London Stock Exchange, and so on, because obviously pre-stablecoin, you needed banks to move money in the first place. And if that's the case, then they get to set the price and you have to take it or leave it. You don't really have a choice to go elsewhere because the person who controls the flow of money also controls the price of how it should be priced. So you basically pay what they tell you to pay. And then as a result, the market structure evolved primarily to be an RFQ where you get the quote from the bank. And then if you tack on more service providers like PSPs, cross-border, and everyone has their own fee. And then by the time it gets to the consumer, you're paying a lot more on the FX than you should be. I think with stablecoins, what it did is it removed the dependency on banks to move money, where you can just do it without that big elephant in the room. And once you have that, you can do a lot more interesting things. And that's where we're like, okay, if you can build a central limit order book that enables true price discovery, then you essentially become the source where FX price happens. And without any other further intermediaries, you can basically we can give anyone access to the true price of any market, be the big G7s or the emerging markets and anything, right? So, and that's where we think it's gonna remove a lot of the additional price that stacks up, and then you can get like a lot more in how much you save in a year, and then on the FX, right? So that's kind of where this thing is headed.
Got it. You're following crypto ethos and removing the middleman. But do you think like the end game is onboarding these big banks who are managing the FX rates today? Or is it just directly onboarding these brokers or fintechs?
I believe banks would be the last to adopt something like this because, obviously, they are big, the incumbent, and obviously right now, they have no incentive to do like fair market pricing because they are essentially making money by giving you spreads on RFQ, right? So on the other hand, if other consumers who do pay that extra price end up becoming, using our platform more and more, eventually, I feel like it actually also gets incentivizes banks to become liquidity providers or even takers to be on the platform, right? So I feel like it's like the payment providers and fintechs are the low-hanging fruit. And then eventually you get to the big fish, right? So that's how I think about it.
Nice. Yeah, super exciting. I'd like to touch on vaults because privacy plays a big role for vaults, and traders or trading firms or anyone with alpha who wants to run their strategies in like an asset management format. So why do you think vaults are a game changer or important for Hibachi?
Yeah, I can give you a high level. So basically, I mean, one of the key things with anything is like, any trading is liquidity, right? So without liquidity, you have no exchange. And vaults essentially allow you to bootstrap the needed capital to improve your liquidity. And then also it allows any market maker or a liquidity provider to basically run their strategies without having to source like tons of capital, because now you're essentially democratizing access where anyone can contribute capital and then, create a pool and use that to bring the liquidity versus requiring one party to post like millions of dollars, right? So it's a powerful tool that helps both the people running the strategies to make money for themselves and for the vault providers, and without parking tons of capital in a single venue. And then from a LP point of view, they can earn passive yield without knowing how to run these strategies. So it's basically bringing two different skill sets together, and then it complements the entire ecosystem. So I think in general, it's a powerful tool, obviously hyper liquid. So it's going to become a big thing coming in the coming years.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest differentiators of our industry. And I think it's one of the very first times that we're seeing what Varun said, the ability to democratize strategies and involve parties that would traditionally not be able to earn on liquidity provision, for example, to essentially be able to, to be a part of that layer of the exchange. And the flip side is also interesting, obviously, for people who are running strategies, because it's a way to bootstrap capital. It's a way for the exchange to also just ramp up liquidity in an elegant way. So overall, I think this is one of the most kind of interesting win-win-win scenarios that you can come up with when it's well designed. I'm very excited to see how this scales. And, the worlds are kind of merging here all in one product between all the different types of participants. in the ecosystem. But for me, it's really, again, democratizing access to strategies. I think is super interesting because historically that has not been the case. This is still relatively new. Yeah, obviously Hyperliquid was kind of like the hockey stick moment, I think, for vaults. And then from there, it's been a bunch of different iterations and different ideas and different designs. And so I think we're still in the very early stages of what vaults can do. And a lot of people are, I think, very excited, and they're trying different types of vaults for different use cases. But as an exchange, it's a very straightforward, and clear value proposition. So yeah, overall, a super, super kind of good additional layer to the ecosystem.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're at Kappa Lab, we're very focused on embedding vaults into the company and building out some interesting vault strategies. I guess we recently announced together FLP, which is a market making strategy that users can partake in on Hibachi, managed by Kappa Lab. The vault plays a core part on the exchange. We're helping grow liquidity and providing a better user environment for traders and users on Hibachi. We see it as a triple pronged. Number one, it serves traders with better liquidity. Number two, provides yield opportunities to users on Hibachi who may or may not be trading. And number three, it's also like works hand in hand with Hibachi. We're hopefully scaling markets and going to be iterating this into FX and growing liquidity there. Yeah, I know you have us live with FLP. You also have GrowFi. How do users gain access to these vaults today?
Yeah, so it depends on the vault. That's the kind of first thing. But overall, the mentality is that those who are kind of long time and active users of the exchange should be the first ones to access these yield products. And I think that's something that we actually saw Lighter do quite well earlier on, where access was essentially gated based on broader activity in the exchange. So we're very much in the camp as well that those who are actively trading, actively using Hibachi should be first ones in line. And so that varies from time to time. There isn't a clear kind of path into these vaults because we also want to kind of give different cohorts of users the opportunity. Should not only be volume based, should not only be P&L based, should not only be points based. It kind of varies, right? So for example, the Grow vault has been gated based on like points ownership, and that is something that we refresh weekly. FLP is going to be opened eventually to the top 10% point earners. When we can open FLP is still a TBD because it's a function of also the larger scaling. And so, obviously you guys are very much actively looking at that and trading to understand when a healthy kind of inflection point is for scaling. But on our end, again, I think it's really just to reward or give access to those like top performers and most active users of Hibachi.
Nice. Yeah, like you both have said, trading strategies have been gated. So we're excited to open up one of ours to the wider public and allow people to deposit. So I guess just stay tuned for more info on that. I guess the next topic is probably the most exciting, and we have already touched on it. Your FX expansion and partnership with Circle and Arc. So what are you building on Arc, and what's your broad plan roadmap?
So essentially, Arc is Circle's Stablecoin-Native L1. I believe they might be releasing it sometime this year. I don't know if they announced the date yet, but if not, I don't want to say the date. But soon, it's pretty much in the horizon. And yeah, I think what the collab entails with Arc is going to be, obviously we are working pretty closely with Circle on this FX product, right? So, and they've been great partners. They've been helping us out significantly with, getting in front of many of these fintechs that we talked about earlier, and then onboarding more design partners and such. With Arc, what we'll be doing is basically posting ZK proofs on Arc, because one of the core theses we have is that a bunch of the stablecoin issuance, especially in emerging markets, is going to happen on Arc. And we've been talking to a bunch of issuers who are pretty keen on issuing those currencies on Arc to begin with. So if we think the FX liquidity is going to start getting concentrated on ARC, then I think it makes sense for us to post those ZK proofs on ARC for people to move money in and out quickly. So that's kind of where I think the ARC collab fits in. But otherwise, I think I'm pretty excited to see what they build. And not to mention, they also have the underlying privacy of the L1 layer, where you're saying is even if you send funds to him in and out of the exchange, no one else can basically see your movement, which is actually a big one, right? Because otherwise we see like anytime a big firm sends funds to Binance, like everyone is tracking that. So that is something I think ARC by design, they say they prevent them. So that will be a pretty cool feature to have at the L1 level. And especially for large institutions, that would be a big differentiator, I think. So
yeah, I'm excited also for USDC as gas. I think other chains have like their own native token. And so for an institution that, to actually be able to operate on chain, they would have to have and hold the balance of this like non-stable asset. So I think that adds some complexity that is unnecessary. So ARC's design is pretty interesting in the sense that gas is natively going to be USDC. And so with that and the opt-in privacy and like the instant settlement, I think there's a really good chance to really onboard a new set of users who historically have not been able to really operate on chain. And so that's what I'm excited to see, like the larger ecosystem grow, liquidity to kind of converge, and for apps to be able to kind of build on top of and start to serve those users. So I think in our like ongoing conversations and kind of sessions with Circle and ARC, that's been a big driver for us to also point towards FX, because we really do believe that FX is going to go and start to take on stablecoins as a superior infrastructure layer to what's historically been, pretty slow and really heavy. And so I think naturally for us, it just made a lot of sense to, given the technology that we have, what we're building towards, to kind of just take on FX as not just like a line item as a different RWA, but its own category, because it definitely deserves to be so, given the size of the market. So lots of work happening there. You'll see the transition kind of over time start to take shape. Recently, we reskinned the whole UI to make it look more kind of institutional friendly, and our website is updated. Soon you'll see some FX products as well, like on the prep side. And then the big ticket item for us is going to be spot. So a lot of the flow today in FX is very much spot for different reasons, but for us it's unblocking the ability to list these spot assets is really the next big milestone.
Yeah. And what role does Circle or like this individual stablecoin issuer play in refreshing liquidity on the exchange? Because I understand from our perspective, handling spot markets means rebalancing. So it means we will have to interact quite a bit with the underlying. So I can see how you're marrying the two together.
Yeah, I think the issuers and obviously Circle is one of them on ARC, but they've actually been very clear about building an ecosystem where other issuers can also essentially create their other stablecoins and have them be a core component of ARC. So given that Circle is not the only issuer on ARC, I think it's going to create the way that I see issuers is essentially from like an on and off ramping perspective, because I think the ability to kind of like mint and burn stablecoins is going to be very important for us as an exchange to be able to lean into, so that people can go onto USDC from just straight up fiat USD seamlessly. But same goes for the peso, the real, all these other currencies that are less active today. So I think that's kind of the role of the issuer for the next kind of adoption cycle. And then from there, obviously like liquidity needs to converge. And I think that's a function of the larger ecosystem, like you guys probably being comfortable rebalancing and holding some of these assets alongside other participants, and obviously real use cases tied to them ideally.
Does this also mean that you're working on like multi-collateral or onboarding different stablecoin collaterals onto the exchange?
That's right. Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, that's correct. For
That's
spot
on.
will be exactly spot on.
I took your lines. So go ahead. Anything to add on that?
It's very important. I think it's actually one of the most kind of key features that I'm looking forward to, because being able to essentially trade with these different stable coins natively and without like barriers is going to be a key component of this.
So it's predominantly spot market, right? So a lot of that is converting and going from one currency to another. But then obviously derivative products, including perps, can be used as a risk management instrument. So obviously there's a demand for both, but I feel like without spot, it doesn't really, it's not really a true FX. But at the same time, we can still use perps or even futures and swaps and so on to allow people to manage risk and exposure. They are like, especially if there's a fintech that has a net exposure in one direction, then they can basically push that. So
I know that one of the issue is that some emerging stablecoins, you're not allowed to short them. Like on a few venues, you're not allowed to short stablecoins. Like for example, BRL, like Brazilian lira, I'm pretty sure it's illegal to short the stablecoin. But yeah, anything else you'd like to say or announce or provide the listeners with?
Varun, I think you should give closing words.
Yeah, no, the closing words. So there's a lot to look forward to. Next 3 to 4 months is going to be a lot of new stuff coming up, because I think obviously we announced the FX direction 2 months ago, and then there's been the build is in full force. So the vault architecture, the vault infra is done. I think the next stages would be, one is obviously zero downtime is a big infra lift that we're currently working on, which basically means there'll be no more scheduled maintenance windows ever. So like it'll be like 100% liveness, which is going to be pretty amazing. And on top of that, obviously the spot markets are currently being worked on. There's also a bunch of compliance rails that we need to build out so that we can actually serve these institutions. So that is going to be a medium lift. So these would be, once we get there, you essentially have like a full-on FX thing, which we are sort of targeting sometime in Q3 of this year. So it'd be pretty good stuff, right? So, and then obviously for some retail to be excited about, there'll be a new final season 3 of Points program coming up right after this one that ends next week.
Let's go. Okay, yeah, I'm excited for season 3. Thanks for the chat. Hope you guys enjoyed, and thank you, Varun and Thibault. Thanks for joining us. It's been great to chat, and looking forward to the next one.
All right. No, thank you. All right.